All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's Thursday, and believe it or not, I'm back from the Channel Strong tour. It's still going on, but last couple weeks on the road was pretty cool. And if you remember, last Tuesday, our friends from Team Zorus out of Connecticut kind of stepped in and helped us talk shop for a little bit about the industry. But I want to kind of start to take this session to dive into who they are, what they do, talk about the big picture, right? Is the security landscape too complicated and getting worse, or do we have a handle on it? So that's kind of the idea of what we're going to dive into today. So before we get into the weeds, I'd like to introduce or reintroduce both Ian McChord and Chris Keith. And I want to give both of you a chance to maybe give everybody a little bit of background on yourselves if they've never run into you before, don't know your history in the industry, how you got to where you're at now. And, that could be a good foundation point so we can kind of bounce off of that.
Yeah, I can get it started. I was the head of product at Datto. Austin McChord is my older brother. I was in the basement of my dad's small civil engineering building where Datto was founded. And it was an incredible ride. I was there for 8 years, served on the board of directors, and still a little bit involved with the company, but not in a real big capacity. I left Datto in October of 2018. I started a product marketing company called Collective Intelligence, which was big in the event space, and then a pandemic occurred, which was really bad for that space. But the timing was serendipitous because the head of R&D, a guy named Greg Gage, started Zorus 3 years ago. I had been involved with him over the years and just helping him with the product. And last summer, things really took off for Zorus. And he mentioned to me that they were looking for a new CEO and he wanted to move over to CTO. And so in October, I took that position, and it's been good ever since. And one of my first hires was Chris Keith, and I'll let him take it from here.
Yeah, so that's kind of when I came into the picture as well. So just brief background on me. I started at Zorus as the director of sales back in the November timeframe. Ian and I kind of loosely knew each other from the technology space out in Denver. That's where we had kind of met. And I had actually been in a sales role for my entire kind of life leading up to this particular opportunity. Worked in both hardware and software. Was familiar with the distribution channel from a hardware perspective. So a little bit different than the MSP channel. But still kind of familiar with how people operated. Absolutely did a ton of work with small to medium sized businesses for my entire career, as well as kind of working towards enterprise sales, to the later part before jumping back over here to Zorus. But like I said, Ian and I have been talking. He kind of was involved with Zorus at an extremely high level. I kind of mentioned, hey, we have this product that's really far. The founder is looking at stripping away from that CEO type of role, more into the CTO. I'm thinking about coming on as a CEO. And when I started to do more research into it, obviously knowing Ian, his background, his business acumen, that was something I was excited about. But then just hearing, everyone else that was involved on the Zorus leadership team, both like at the board level, at the product level, and other people, other parts of the other pieces that he was kind of putting together, was extremely, it was just exciting because this is not only have these guys done it before, but they did it at the highest level possible. So was truly kind of, excited and frankly honored to kind of have the opportunity. And we've been kind of, we hit the ground running in November. It's been a long winter in the Northeast, no doubt, but fingers are crossed that events like you're throwing, George, are going to continue to happen. And we kind of, slowly and surely kind of return to some sense of normalcy here over the next, ideally weeks, not months anymore. So fingers crossed there. And it's been really exciting for us here on the Zorus side.
You're on mute, George.
I was going to say small sandbox, right? I mean, it's always, people reconnecting, at a different place down the street and starting something new. And, but the cool part is that you're not starting at ground zero, right? You already have kind of come up, understand who's what and how the sandbox works and that kind of stuff. So that's always great. and working with people that you have a good, rapport with is so critical. I mean, I know that that's redundant at times, but then you knock your head for a few years and say, why am I still here? No, I'm just kidding. But no, not really. All right. So let's zoom out for a second and understand that we're hearing about security sessions left and right and up and down. And I think the word security is becoming so repeated that people are just starting to almost get numb. Zoom back even 5 years ago, 2015, 2016, coming out of the early 2000s, right? Your security stack wasn't too bloated, right? Maybe 3-4 items in the mix and, some best practices. I feel like that's exploded. Now we're at 10, 12, 15 items in the stack, and you're managing how many of those vendors? Well, probably not many, because the MSP has so many things to deal with. Now this is becoming its own competency. So zoom out for a second and explain to me and everyone else, what does it look like today from your seat, right? Like, you're seeing it big picture. You zoomed out 30,000 feet. Is it working? Is it broken? What's not happening well, and what is happening well?
Yeah, I'll just jump in on this one. I think that, to me, the biggest challenge that we're facing in the security side is the decentralization of the infrastructure. And this has been happening probably for, I would say, like a decade. And it started with SaaS apps, it started with public cloud, and now it's become the work from home. And the office is no longer this protected place of where we'll have all the business done, and it lives between the machines and the firewall, and this is a safe haven. And now it's, hey, every device is a work device. Every device is connected to a whole bunch of apps. And so I think that what MSPs really need to be thinking about is just, how can we make things simple right at the endpoint? How can we bring security from the firewall to the connected device? I think that's one of the biggest challenges that MSPs are facing in the community right now.
Okay, so big picture, the tech stack, and we've had a couple of MSPs on recently who are saying that their tech stack consists of some sort of log monitoring solution, whether it's a standalone or through some sort of third-party partner that's acting as a SOC, right? Security Operations Center, because they don't have the time. This is like the RMM conversation back in the day, right? I'm getting 10,000 alerts. Like, I'm ignoring it at this point. I don't know what the hell is going on. So there's a log jam overflow problem, I call it, right? Because the second you start monitoring for security incidents, in addition to everything else that you're supposed to be monitoring, you can have a ticket board with 100,000 tickets in like 2 days, right? It just explodes. A lot of noise. So that's part of the challenge, right? There's some sort of log monitoring and or partner to manage that, incident monitoring status. And then there's a combination of a next generation antivirus solution, right? MDR, they're calling it, right? More, it's kind of like the evolution of how things are going.
Mm-hmm.
Probably with some second opinion scanner that, does like a malware layer, right? Then there's a DNS layer, right? Where they're trying to catch things in the moment as you're transacting through the internet. And then there's, encryption, something handling encryption at the device level, hopefully, especially the industries that absolutely need it. But I think it's starting to become a little bit more of a standard as we're going through security land. And then there's, the firewall UTM when it's there. I don't know if everyone's going to put a Fortinet or a WatchGuard or a Sonic Wall or a Meraki at a house. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I would probably say no, but okay. I mean, the CEO might have one. And then there's a reporting component that's completely missing to pull all this stuff together, because how in the hell are you supposed to know all this stuff's working? And if you have a problem, when do you see it? And now there's even more stuff coming into the equation, right? Those are now like kind of the basics that you need in the security world. So right there could be 8 vendors. Right there could be 8, at least could be 8 vendors. and none of them are talking to each other, right? Like you're going out there and you're buying stuff and you're hopefully finding a way to pull it into your tools, but there's no centralized anything there, to your point. And from a cost standpoint, it, depending on your math, right, it could add another, 20, 25, $30 in stuff, right, to add to the per user or seat count cost or however you're billing, right? So the good news is that helps you charge more. The bad news is that with that little bit of upcharge, the expectation from the end customer is ginormous. Like the expectation, well, I'm paying for all this now, I'm never gonna have a problem, is baloney. So tell me what you think of that little stack we just talked about, and how does that play for the MSP's situation versus the end customer's expectation?
Chris, you want to jump in there?
Yeah. Yeah. So George, you bring up a really good point, and this is something, frankly, kind of like my shift or my focus right now on the Zorus side has been talking to our MSP, our partners that have been extremely successful with our product, and getting a feel for kind of how they're approaching the market, right? Because everyone approaches the market differently. Some people are very technical and they have that relationship with their end users and they trust them. Some people are truly, great salespeople, and they're able to kind of go in and instill that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and they're able to kind of land people that way. I think, to your point specifically, though, there's certainly the complexity is at an all-time high right now as far as the actual stack goes, but so are the threats. So that's something that we absolutely have to take into consideration, right? Like this is the reality of the world that we're living in. One of the things, and this is something that we've kind of talked about, but specifically, as for something as back in 2017, in the small to medium-sized business space specifically, 50% of executives, so this is owners of small to medium-sized businesses, those men and women were trying to cut down on technology spend back in 2017. Well, fast forward 3 years, right? 2020, 2021, a pandemic happened. These individuals saw just how important not only having that technical, that IT infrastructure is, so making sure that everything's fast, that people can be working from home, and that things are secure. That 50% of folks trying to save money on their technology stack back in 2017, that's now 8%. So for the first time in our lives, or certainly recently, we're seeing this paradigm shift from a small to medium-sized business owner perspective, where not only do they realize how important technology and security and things along these lines are, but they're actually looking to spend more and kind of futurize themselves, if you will. So,
well, hold on a second. Before people started, getting crushed because their businesses were shut down, they were looking to spend more. They probably still are looking to be a little bit nimble. I think the concern, though, is there's a catch-22, right? Hey, I reduced my car insurance so that my premium went down, and then I got into an accident and I regret it, right? There's a little bit still of the, hey, we're still unlocking the country and the world, and people are still trying to count their pennies to make sure that they're okay. So there's a little bit of that still going on. And, although granted, I agree, that it's going this way, not this way, I hope, for most. At least that's the way I see it. I still think there's a huge question mark, and maybe it's education, or maybe it's like the doctor who says, oh, I'm a sole practitioner. I'm never going to get audited for HIPAA. They're never going to knock down my door. They're going to go to the hospital down the street. They're going to go to this huge surgery practice with 20, people involved. I'm one guy. I don't need to spend money on that. There's a little bit of that going on, right? Where it's like, why is the bad guy coming after me when they're going to steal billions of dollars from Sony or billions of dollars from somebody else? So granted, I'm sure you're about to say, but look at the headlines, George. It's happening. Like you don't have to go far. You turn on the news, whatever channel you preference or prefer, and you see this hack, that hack, this hack, that hack. And it's like, I still don't think that messaging is getting through to the small guy. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this, that, okay, so think about people who rob banks. They're not going to Fort Knox. Why? Because they won't get in.
Right.
going to their neighborhood branch because they know that the security is lax. I mean, that, like, if you're an opportunistic hacker, who are you going to go for? Someone who has a CISO and a, balanced practice, a Bank of America? No, why would you do that? You could hit up 5 more small businesses than try and die trying to hit a big business. I mean, like, I think that the security that enterprise companies are able to afford really makes them well protected. And that these guys, I mean, ransomware attacks happen everywhere, but they certainly happen quite a bit in small businesses. And I'd say the success rate of ransom attacks for small businesses is far higher than the success rate of large businesses. I mean, it doesn't cost them any different for how they, send the ransomware.
No, fair. So I think that, MSPs have struggled, historically on the value proposition of, hey, I want to upcharge you X% to give you this, this, and this. The cool part is the bigger guys are enforcing now, right? When Microsoft comes down and says, guess what? You don't have a choice. It's going on. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. That helps your conversation because it's not you. It's like, hey, this guy over here, you want to call, the CEO of Microsoft, be my guest. But until then, this is what we got to do. And they're going to look, okay, whatever. So that kind of starting to happen. But what is, in your opinion, the minimum? Because there are still a lot of guys out there who are still running under the, last generation, security approach, right? They're still running the antivirus, maybe a malware scanner and a firewall. And that's kind of sort of it, right? I mean, that's not working anymore. I don't know if it has been working for a while, but they just kind of gotten lucky because, the bullet didn't come and hit their window, right?
Mhm.
I would just jump in and only say that you can't focus on the customers that just won't buy it, because guess what? They just won't buy it. The most successful MSPs that I talk to are the ones who are looking for new opportunities. They're giving, their best pitches to their existing customers, and they're trying their best to get them up to date. But at some point, you can only you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it. Like, you can't get caught up with people who just won't pay for it. Because guess what? Nothing you're going to say or do will get them there. And maybe they will pay for it when they get attacked. And was it your fault? You couldn't do anything. You did everything you could. I see much more opportunity in co-managed space for security. I think MSPs are being tapped constantly in co-managed situations to be the security provider for these companies, because internal IT is so far disadvantaged in security knowledge, and they're not hiring dedicated security people for a lot of the co-managed situations.
But neither is MSP. I can't tell you how many of the MSP bought in. Like, it was hard enough to get the MSP to bring in a guy who was half spending their time on managing all their tools, right? Now you're expecting them to bring in a dedicated security person. This is where a lot of this outsourcing is happening, right?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on whatever they want to do for their business. But, my thought is that, hey, I'm talking to MSPs that 20 years ago didn't even know what an MSP was. And they learned how to become an MSP. They were break fix and they all did it. They learned, and that's what they, were able to do.
This is a good follow-up question then. At what point, like, and again, if you mismarket yourself, it can absolutely come back to bite you. So there's been this debate that's been happening for at least the last 18 months. At what point do you say, I'm an MSP, security focused, but an MSP, or, oh, no, I'm an MSSP? I mean, to me, there's a huge line between those two, but a lot of people are starting to announce that is what they are.
I'll let Chris jump in here, but I just wanted to say one thing is just my thought in the future. I think those two terms get closer together, not further away.
Fair. But as of today's definition, when, and again, we're not lawyers here, but I'm just being fair, right? As a buyer, we're all buyers of services and products. At what point is it fair to call yourself an MSSP versus an MSP? And you can say I'm a security focused MSP. You can say I'm a security first MSP, but I'm not saying that I'm the guy on the other side either, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think That's a really tough question because, like you said, we're not lawyers, and I think that there's certainly not a one size fits all. I mean, even regionally in the channel, like people operate completely differently. So I think a lot of that has to come down to, you have to look yourself in the mirror, and it could be as simple as, you hire, one tech, one resource who truly is sophisticated in that space. Or, you decide to really kind of lean into that area of your technology stack. It could be something, potentially that simple. But I do want to just take one step back, George. I think because we were talking about like the older approach versus the newer approach, and I think.
But that story comes back into how are you marketing yourself, right?
Exactly.
I mean, not to get too deep in the weeds, but I just got to point this out.
Yeah.
I mean, this exact topic is where the state of Louisiana came out and said you need to identify yourself. Either you're this MSP or you're an MSSP, and you need to tell us that. And we don't know where that leads. We can speculate, but there's a reason they're asking this question, right? And your stack is part of that conversation. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I'm totally with you. I guess, one of the key differences, just like, again, from that older style to the new, though, is, are you being reactive or are you doing your best to try and be proactive, right? So that's, when we start talking about, MDRs, XDRs, and things along those lines, what's interesting, what's new about those is, they're being proactive, right? They're not waiting to, just the antivirus, your system isn't already infected. They're looking to see, if then statements, if we're seeing things that are going to potentially compromise the system, let's cut them off before it actually happens. And that's something that I think is really, really important. You could even call it MSP 1.0 versus MSP 2.0 is rather, and that comes with the reporting and everything along those lines is, you having a proactive, like, again, not the break fix model where you're getting a phone call when something's broken and things aren't working out, but instead you're actually, not only are you protecting on the front end, but you are then communicating those reports, and you're kind of, you're having that level of a relationship or a partnership with your end users. That's something that we feel really strongly about Zorus, and kind of is the way that things are progressing, right?
Okay, so now that we've defined, okay, MSP 1.0 versus 2.0 is the better description versus MSP versus MSP. I like that, by the way. That was a great answer to that. What is your position on what does it mean from where you sit as how are you proactive? What does that mean? Can you define that for me? When it comes to the security conversation, from where you sit, what does proactive mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that's extremely important to that is not just protecting the hardware or the devices, right? So this goes beyond, not just protecting the devices, of course, in the office, but are you protecting those devices when they leave the office, no matter where they're accessing the internet? Is that at home? Is it at a Starbucks coffee shop? Where is that? And are those devices going to be protected? Is it mobile? Everything along those lines. Another thing that's extremely important, and this is something that we're trying to, you talk about marketing and the messaging. This is something that's important to us on the Zorus side is, frankly, with our Archon or the web filtering technology, we're not necessarily just protecting your device. Of course, we're protecting your device. We're protecting you from you, right? So if you click on a link that's compromised and it takes you to some sort of a phishing site, at that point, it's too late. You're typing in your password. People are getting that information. What we're aiming to do is not just protect, of course, the vehicle is your device, but we're trying to protect you from you so that you don't accidentally, make a mistake or click on something that you shouldn't. We're blocking that from happening, frankly, before it even populates. And that's something, that aspect is something that I think is going to be crucial for the MSP 2.0s. Is not just focusing on the hardware, but again, taking it that step further and protecting, us and frankly, your employees as well, for making mistakes that, just are tough to avoid.
Okay, so clearly as part of your solution, you're talking about link verification, you're talking about web traffic monitoring, and maybe some blocks in place for obviously known bad places so that you don't get into the wrong street, the wrong neighborhood on the internet. We're talking about obviously automation around that conversation and reporting. So we got that so far. What else are we missing?
We're missing one of the biggest things known to the corporate world as we know it, or business as we know it, productivity, George. So, again, we feel pretty strongly that some sort of a hybrid workforce is going to exist moving forward. Fingers crossed here. Ideally, it's not something that we're being forced to do, right? Like we can't go into the office. But realistically, man, it would be nice if I have something to do on Friday afternoon, I could just work from home on a Friday, but go into the office Monday through Thursday.
For the record, Chris, as we were along the Channel Strong tour, which is still going on, by the way, a lot of people were like, yeah, we haven't been to the office for a year. So I was like, well, it was nice to bring your team back together. They're like, yeah, we haven't seen each other for a while. And I'm like, exactly.
Yep. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but we kind of have like a little bit of we're going into the office some days. Some of us are staying home. It's whatever you're comfortable with. I like going into the office. It's nice to have the option not to, but I think as we continue to normalize here, just this hybrid approach, it's not going to go away. So something else that we have to offer, and frankly, something that's been that it's interesting. The sentiment has changed even from November when we started to today. Is a little bit of a productivity solution, because the reality is most leaders or managers or executives, they're not looking over people's shoulders, for the 8 hours or the 9 hours that they're at the office. They just kind of want to know that you're there, right? So people are kind of looking for some sort of a solution, and luckily, we're in a position to provide just that, where it's productivity, but it's not, it's not screenshots. It's not looking at exactly how people are spending time.
I was just about to say, how do you, what is your how does your system determine productivity? Is it because they have Microsoft Office open? Is it like, are they on the internet searching, surfing, or how do you determine productivity?
Yeah, so the productivity is in the eye of the beholder, right? So we're able to be a little bit flexible with that. Yeah, correct. Yeah. But what we're able to do is again, because our agent is living at the kernel level of your device, we're just able to see, number one, that you're active versus idle, or the machine is locked. And then we're able to kind of see whatever's in focus, right? So, generally, I know probably most of us at home, we'll have 20 tabs open. What we're going to be kind of tracking or taking a look at is, what's in focus. So what your mouse has most recently clicked on. And then what's also nice is it doesn't matter if the application is web-based. Obviously, we could see if there's something specifically in a Chrome browser, if the application itself is web-based. So, Spotify, Slack, things along those lines, that's going to show up as well. But again, because we're at that kernel level of your device, it could be, Microsoft Office, things along those lines too. So, we have a ton of MSPs that service law firms, and it makes their job a little bit easier because everything's billable hours, right? So just kind of being able to track that. And again, not as much as frankly, a big brother tool, but a lot of folks are just using it. Man, how many of us are stuck in meetings hour after hour after hour, and it feels like, nothing really is getting done. People are just, we can't help but think, and frankly, we're really excited about, using this tool as frankly, just, making work more productive, not it being a big brother sort of a feel.
So Brent asks, is this forcing businesses to reassess the definition of productivity? I assume that in your solution, there's a way to weight things differently, or to decide what's more important or not to that particular business.
Yep, without a doubt. And this, so this is something that we're going to continue to kind of be improving too. Again, we're kind of lucky, or Zorus is in a position right now where, again, we're still really early on, and there's really not a ton of rules that are written, right? So there's not necessarily a playbook that's out there that we're abiding by. We're kind of, we're figuring it out as we go. And again, each business is very different, right? So, and even different parts of businesses. So for instance, if Ian is looking at me and I'm on Facebook 24/7, he's probably going to have a little bit of an issue with that. But
unless you're the marketing person, yeah.
But if I was in marketing, George, and we're generating, hundreds of leads on a weekly basis, then he's going to be saying, spend more time on Facebook going in those paid ads, right? So again, it's going to kind of differ from position to position, from company to company. What we want to do is, again, continue to work with folks like you, MSPs throughout the country, and just create a product that is going to be useful for you, however you kind of see fit.
Okay, so the value proposition. By the way, I probably should have asked this in the beginning. What does Zorus mean? Like, what's behind the name? I should have started with that.
Yeah, Ian, do you want to?
Yeah, it's based. Well, so it's kind of two things. We've got kind of a Greek theme for our product names. And then our founder, Greg Gage, lives on Lake Zor, which is a small lake in southwestern Connecticut.
Right on. Makes sense. That's cool. It's just an easy question. All right. So the value proposition for MSPs, they go to Zorus and say, how many products would you be potentially Brent says, sounds like a sword. I don't even want to, and I don't know what that is, but yeah, it's an interesting name.
To Jeffrey Lee, at the Zorus Tech website right now, it's actually going through an update, so it's not down, but I was like, it's too much traffic from the MSP Initiative webinar.
Hey man, I'm all for it. We're sending real big traffic going on.
George does it again.
It'll be right back up. I'm sorry, man.
So if an MSP is looking at Zorus versus a bunch of other solutions, how many products would they be going out there separately trying to find on their own? How many of those would be consolidating into your one unified platform?
Yep, and this isn't necessarily a one size fits all either, because it kind of depends on exactly where you're using Zorus. But at the very minimum, it kind of like our backbone is frankly two products. So we have that web filtering, and just going back on the Greek thing, it's Archon, Archon, not Archon. So that's Archon is one. That's gonna be the proxy based web filtering solution, and then the second, Triton, that's the remote employee monitoring. So at the least, it's going to be consolidating, two into one. The other part that's really nice about that is frankly kind of like our secret sauce, if you will. Greg was able to figure out the agent that you download is extremely easy to download. It's extremely easy to toggle on and off. It's relatively silent when you deploy it through, the big RMMs. We play nice because that's obviously the cost of doing business in the channel space, is playing nicely with those RMMs. We do everything that we can to make that agent deployment as easy as possible, and then everything is managed through the cloud as well. So you log in on the back end, you can manage everything remotely, no matter where you are. And again, that's just something that, being channel only, we understand is vital in order for not only us to scale up, but for our partners to scale up and be successful with as well.
Yeah, I was wondering. So there was one thing that you mentioned before, and we're kind of at a moment where this might actually be something I'd like to revisit. And that was about just how many vendors that MSPs need to work with, or have to work with their security solutions.
My list says over 40. I'm just letting you know. I mean, that's for everything. That's not just for security, but security, at least 8. I mean, it's getting. I would argue they're trying to push to 10. It's actually getting. It's almost like I am seeing, maybe you are too, people literally just going out on the security stack as a separate offering and just breaking it off from the MSP and trying to sell it as just that, especially in the co-managed space. But anyway,
I think that's right. No, so I just, there's a broader theme around vendor consolidation as being like a really big goal for MSPs. But I just like to just put something in everybody's head. Careful what you wish for. Keep in mind all of the vendors that have consolidated a ton of MSP vendors into one. I really start hearing only negative things as they get larger and larger. So just careful on if everything came from one vendor, that may not actually be good for you. That may be worse. And that puts a lot of power in a few people's hands to make really big decisions about whether they go direct, big decisions about how they handle support, big decisions about where they go with the product. Having a little bit of diversification in your vendors does protect your business. But obviously is a pendulum, and like there's two sides, and either side is bad, and you want down the middle. And how many vendors that is, I don't know. That's the perfect number. But I think in the security side, we're probably a little high. And so maybe some vendor consolidation and security is coming, and I think it will. I think because the space is new, and anytime that we go into a new technology space, there's a bunch of vendors, and then they consolidate, over time. But I just wanted to.
No, listen, there is absolutely a balancing act. And I don't care how big you are, right? You can talk to Matt Lee over at Iconic, right? They're real big. You can talk to, the guys down in, in Texas that have been in acquisition mode. The name slips me off the top of my head, but at the big side, yes, the less vendors you are, it gets exponentially way less complicated. But also at the smaller MSP level, right? Like, is the time there to play the juggling act, right? Because I'm going to say no. In many MSPs, they do not have the time to handle all of the vendor communication and management that they think that they're supposed to be doing. And part of it is, and again, you coming from where you came from, Ian, like it's like, oh yeah, pull all your stuff into one place, and then you can do that. Not quite sure we ever got there. No, I'm not.
You ever could. Quite frankly, because keep in mind, I mean, the way that this business works and the way that technology works is that it's constantly evolving. It's a problem that will never be solved because it'll become more complicated, and then have new threats, and it'll go to new different area. Like, and that's why there is a need for an MSP. Like, if technology was solvable, if there was a cure instead of a treatment, then there might not be as much of a need for an MSP.
Fair. I'm not going to argue that. So zoom out again, back on your solution now. So I took away 3 things, right? Link checking, the web filtering and monitoring, and this productivity checker, and all rolled into one solution. What does the MSP see versus what does the end customer see? Like, what's the experience from both sides?
That's a great question too. And the answer is the end customer sees whatever the MSP wants them to see. So we're really big on white label and everything, right? Or at least not necessarily white labeling, but giving the MSP the option to do whatever they're most comfortable with. So if they want to sell it as their own solution, that's perfectly fine. If they want to make it, this is Zorus, this is what these guys do, that's perfectly fine as well. So, we have sales materials that go both ways, as well as our blocked pages, as well as the custom reports that we spin up. People are capable of putting our logo, the end user logo, or the MSP logo on there. So really just endlessly try and provide that endless flexibility. Again, understanding that, everyone goes to market differently, and that's perfectly fine.
Fair enough.
And then, I do just want to jump in too, George. So understand the vendor consolidation. I'm a huge believer also in working with the right vendors, right?
Okay.
So if you're working with the right vendors or the right salespeople, or you have the right end users, and you're getting the support that you need, and the product works the way that it's supposed to, you can work with a lot of people. What's tough is when you're working with, companies where things aren't working correctly, you're not getting the support that you need, or someone is a pain in the rear end. That's what hurts. So I just wanted to throw that in there too, from a sales perspective, right?
You've actually mentioned a bunch of things, and let's just touch on them just to make sure we didn't miss them. So your channel only, you don't sell direct. Your
Correct.
support is supporting the MSP, right? Because the end customer is not calling anyone directly at Zorus.
Yep.
3, you can brand, gray, or white label solution, so they can decide how they want to position it.
Yep.
4, assuming the MSP wants to give the customer some sort of access, they have the choice on what that access is.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
5, I assume that there's flexibility in the business terms, right? Like,
Ultimate.
so I mean, is there agreements? Is there terms? Is there contracts? How's that work?
Yeah, so we're ultimately flexible. Just standard. We're month to month. Generally we can get into, we call them pricing agreements. If we'll get aggressive if there's additional seat counts in play, everything along those lines. But really, at the end of the day, is again, what's awesome about being in the channel and being channel only is, when our MSP partners win and they're successful, we are too. So it's not a zero-sum game, right? Like our benefit isn't to our MSP partners' detriment. It all happens together. So the better that we can do, or frankly, the better position that we're able to put our partners in, as a vendor, that like everyone wins, right? So frankly, the way that we see it is, we're really, really confident in the cybersecurity space and in the support that we can give and the relationships that we're building. As far as managing your end users and how to sell the product the right way and how to kind of work with those relationships, our partners are the experts there. So we just want to provide any sort of support that we can and make it as easy for you guys and girls as possible.
100%. So good. So basically what I gather, and I hope I don't get in trouble by saying this, is you took the original early Datto blueprint of how to do business and how to build a company, and you took some of the original Datto heads and you bounced out and said, let's do something new and let's concentrate on security. And this is so, and here's where we're at today based on that effort. And it hasn't really been that long, right? This has only been running for what, a year and a half, two,
3
All
years.
right.
Yeah. I mean, and they took the absolute original Datto blueprint, and that was no one heard of Datto before about 2010. But the company was formed in 2007. And that was because Austin locked himself in a room and created the product and wanted it to be technically sound before he sold it. And Greg did a very similar thing. He left at R&D 3 years ago, started the Zorus, and for 2 years, basically locked himself in a garage and built the product technically sound.
Hey, can we hit lightning twice in the same spot? I think so. I think it could happen. Jeff Lee, by the way, the website's back up if you didn't see that. Jeff Lee says, hey, MSPs want to spend $1 or $2 on every endpoint, and that's just going to cover it all. Yeah, that was the 2010 plan, my friends. I know that you said that tongue in cheek, but $1 or $2 for like every product in the 8 to 10 vendors you need, maybe, but you're quickly getting to like $20 to $30 if you're really going and putting all those products in from all those vendors per user or per device, especially when you're engaging outside knock and SIEM and log monitoring and all of those guys. So for the people, and Ian said it earlier, I'll repeat it, for the people that say that their end customers won't pay, well, maybe you need to look for some new customers, and there's a lot out there, because we found out so far just this year on MSP Initiative that a lot of MSPs are finding new business, like upwards of 50% new business are coming from people who have never engaged in MSP before. That's great. That means there's a lot of business out there, and there is. Let me ask you this. Are you starting to hear, and again, you guys talk to MSPs all day long, are you starting to hear that the liability coverage companies, right, both professional and like everybody needs something, right, in their industry to cover themselves, they're starting to ask if these types of tools are in place, and that rate is being changed based on the answer, right?
100%. Yeah. And that's only getting, going to be more robust. I mean, no one's ever called an insurance company, really up on the technology times. So it takes them a while, but that is something that they're certainly looking for. And yeah, that is an opportunity. And the other thing is, talking about taking the Datto blueprint. I mean, how much did people pay for backup? And then how much did people pay for continuity? That was an upsell, and it worked for a ton of MSPs. I see security in a similar spot. Security 5 years ago isn't security that it is today. And it's an opportunity to upsell. And it is a challenge for MSPs because they do have to go back and change the rhetoric and change the content that they come with. And they need to come with more reports, and they need to understand the story and express it differently. And it is a sales challenge, which is not great. Nobody loves doing it, but except for Chris, but it is something that's important because this is an area for a large part of your future revenue as a managed service provider, at least from my opinion. So it's something to get good at now, because it's something, selling security is going to be a thing for, it's going to be a growing thing for the next 10 years.
Agree. Chris?
Yeah, just to parlay off that briefly too, because it's funny that you bring this up, George, because I was talking to one of our partners just yesterday on this. So his approach was actually like, I say extreme in air quotations here, but when he is on site and he's pitching one of his end users, he kind of is massaging everyone towards having the full levels of protection from every angle from a security standpoint. And again, kind of how he closes that out, or how he really kind of delivers that final message is, look, if something does happen to your business, we're getting to the point where me as the MSP, I'm going to be technically liable. So if you don't feel that this security stuff is necessary, then I'm not the MSP. I am not the partner for you, because I don't want to potentially take on that liability if and when disaster strikes. So I thought that was really interesting. It was just an interesting approach. And frankly, from a business ownership perspective, kind of tough to argue, especially if you are serious about protecting your end users, right?
Listen, we've had Brad Gross, Mr. Technology Lawyer Extraordinaire, on several times. And the MSA, he said, if you haven't reviewed your MSA in the last 3 years, you're way overdue. It's almost like you need to be reviewing your MSA every year with how quickly things are changing. The waiver, right? Remember back in the day, they're like, oh, I don't need backup. And you're like, oh, can you sign this piece of paper saying that I told you needed it and you didn't? That piece of paper sounds great, but in the overall scheme of things, if it's not baked into your formal agreement, it may not go too far. It's a similar conversation here, guys, right? And actually thinking about it a little bit more with the monitoring aspect of your platform, there's there's probably some sort of stock language that could be included in like the company handbook, right? For, hey, if you're on company equipment, and we have the right to monitor your usage as you're on work time, on work equipment, right? That kind of stuff. It's actually a business conversation, which is good because you're having that level of dialogue with the guys who are upstairs. At the end of the day, they're the ones responsible. This is a conversation you're not having with an everyday employee, right? This is a management conversation. So like that's part of the conversation. The other part of the conversation and this is probably stuff you guys already have language and ideas to help people out with on where to go. I'm sure. But like, so on the HR side, but also with hey, this is something to give to your customers if they're looking to implement the solution too, so that they know how to go back and add this language in. So like, going back to the Datto days and still the case today, hey, there's MSP has to cover themselves. The MSP should be consulting with their end customer on how they can cover themselves. And 3, hey, we just want to make sure you understand that if you don't have this and something bad happens and there was no tracking and we didn't know and something came to your front door, we're going to help you. But if you come and sue me, please understand that I'm doing the best that I can based on what you're allowing me to do. I can't be responsible for everything.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, just being completely honest, I really just I don't love that approach. I know that you have to have it and you have to do it for some clients. But in the backup world, when people had that happen, best case scenario, you lose the client. Like there was no other way around it, right? Like because they're gonna say, oh, I didn't, you're gonna be like, I didn't back up your data, and you signed this form, and they're gonna be like, great, well, you ruined my company, so I'm gonna blame you, because I'm not gonna blame myself, because nobody blames themselves when something bad happens. So I think that it should always be a last resort. You should try any way to get them to upsell them, or even work with the vendors like us to be like, hey, this is what they can spend. Is there any way we can make it work? Is there something, I think you really want to try to go every route possible to get them adequately protected. And then go to that as like, hey, you signed this piece of paper, so you can't sue me, but I'm definitely going to lose your business.
100 agree. 100. I agree with you 100% on that. And reality is, I've always been, and I still to this day tell people that we work with, put it all in. I think Jeff actually mentioned this in the beginning in the chat. Put it all in and force them to tell you to take it out, right? Force them to tell you, I don't need this because, or I don't want this because. And like, if you start in that position, you're in a good position rather than you trying to add stuff in after the fact. And quite frankly, and again, back to Jeff's like $1 to $2 per endpoint. Yeah, as hopefully everyone's built some sort of mechanism into their agreements that every year, you want to call cost of living, fine, but every year there's a little percentage of increase, right? And you can start to kind of sneak stuff in, right, to help you and help them as that increase is happening. I mean, those are the best mechanisms without having that friction point, I think.
Yeah, and I would say MSP should always be on the lookout for services that they can essentially be able to produce a deliverable for an end user, because there are a lot of security stuff where you just not, you protected them. So they give them a report they never read. And that is an area where, I have to just sort of plug the productivity monitoring. It is a really great product because you're going to get to show them something that they'll actually look at and they'll appreciate. It's something that they will read. And so just not saying that, productivity monitoring is the end all be all to be adding, but I'm just saying always looking for services that can continue to, increase the value in your customers' eyes by giving them deliverables that they may care about or want. That is huge and should not be overlooked as you're adding solutions.
I think to that point, part of the problem that MSPs have And I go back to what I call the conference credit card swiping syndrome. When you're rolling down the aisle and you just keep on buying stuff that you never turn on. Don't do that. Is that they keep on buying tools that are back-end tools for the MSP, which are great because it makes them help scale their businesses, but they're not necessarily customer facing, right? And so part of the problem and the continual challenge that MSPs need to do is figure out the customer's experience, right? Their journey, what they see on a regular basis. And this sounds like a sticky way, right? For people to show value, right? So many times, and we've heard it over and over again. Yeah, like everything kind of just works. Like, why do we need you? Like, well, no. Everything works and it's smooth and you don't hear from us because you're paying us. And so there's this constant onus to show value, right? So that these guys don't start to question, well, we never see you. So what, you're not doing anything. So this type of stuff can get really sticky because it actually drills down into the organization, right? I mean, if I'm the CEO, I maybe don't have enough time to see everybody's report, but maybe at the department level or at the pod level, that's the type of stuff where they're like, oh, dude, this is really cool. I can make sure people are doing their work.
Yeah, and when you add, every year you're thinking about updating your MSP, fully managed bundle of products. Try to have a mix of, okay, some back end and some things that are helping them on, but they might not see it, and then a few that are visible. So it doesn't feel like that you're jacking up the price and not adding anything. And the end user can feel that way a lot of the times. A lot of, customers that I've talked to, and customers, they do be like, oh, I think my MSP is just increasing prices nonstop, and I don't see anything because of it. It's like, well, I personally know they're not, but how to get to them, that's how you do it. Is you show them something and they go, wow, that's kind of neat. Like,
I think like a whole, like there were products that really popped up to try and aggregate data from multiple vendors to try and present, I almost go like a bright gauge type of play, right? Where you're trying to pool data together to kind of present, hey, look, your antivirus is working and your backup is working and you're this. I don't think it got past a certain point. I feel like some MSPs almost had to go and, whether it's like a Microsoft Power BI play, or they tried to create their own solution because it wasn't easy out of the product to get that visually nice and like actual decent presentation, right? So I think right there, if you're trying to get a shine factor, if that's really built into the tool and it looks good and it makes sense and they can use it easily and not need, to Google terms off of the document, yeah, that's a win. Right there alone, that's a win. Despite even the actual technology component, just the presentation part, I think is a super win. And that's the mindset that everybody needs to have moving forward with any tool they bring on, to be honest.
100%.
Cool. So like, I'm not going to hold you to it, but in the last few minutes, is there anything, I'm not even say roadmap, I'm going to say radar. Is there anything on your radar that you would think might be coming down in a future Zorus world that would be added to the three things we talked about already?
I've got a few that are top of mind for me. One is more platform support. So we've got a Mac agent that's coming down the line. That's really good. And then we're continuing to do kind of get every platform. And then the other thing is that we're going to continue down the security path. And the cool thing, when you were mentioning the 6 things or whatever it was about, describing Zorus, the final 7th one is that our roadmap is exclusively for MSPs because our business is exclusively for MSPs. So we're not working on something for an enterprise client. We're not working on direct. We're not working on any of that stuff. So everything is going to be relevant. And yeah, we'd love to. We're right now, I see security as prevention, detection, and response, basically, or mitigation. And we're in prevention, and we're headed towards detection. So whatever letter you want to put in front of DR, that's where we're going.
Hey,
it change every day.
But it sounds like you're taking a lot of real-time feedback from the guys that are working with you to mature the product, which is super critical because, to your point, a lot of the larger entities do not give you an avenue to do that. So I like that. As a guy who's in the space, that's the only way to go, in my opinion. But sometimes that falls on deaf ears. So I love to hear that, guys. It looks like Jeff Lee's already booked a demo. So we've already won on that front because Jeff Lee is
Yep.
hard to please. Hopefully the demo goes well. But not knocking on you, Jeff, just giving you a hard time. So everybody should go to zorustech.com. It's up, by the way, and it's beautiful. So go take a look at it. And when you call in or you book your demo, just, have an open mind. Take a look at something new. We're all tech guys, right? And see if you find the value in the presentation to your customer. I like it. I think that makes sense. And the more and more prettiness you can give to your customer, I think the better you're going to be. People just buy off of that. I mean, look at Apple. Look at our friend Mr. Musk, right? I mean, if he's sending nice spaceships up into the sky and nice electric cars, that's why the other guys are behind. Just saying. Anyway, zorustech.com. Check them out. And give them feedback too, right? They're open to hear what you're looking for, and that'll help them shape their product too. Guys, I'm excited. I'm going to go sign up for a demo myself.
We'll hold you to that, George.
I am. I'm going to sign up. Chris, you better book a time with me for next week. We're gonna go rock on.
I have your email. You're locked in now.
See that? I already gave the sales guy my email. It's over. So everyone, this whole session was recorded, by the way. You can go back and rewind it. And you can, on the way to the demo, say, well, wait a minute. At 2 minutes and 33 seconds, you said this. I'm sure they'll love that. But you can find that on mspinitiative.com. These guys have also been, supporting us on the Channel Strong Tour. We really appreciate that. We want to see you guys out on the road. There's going to be more of those coming later on this year. And these guys, I believe, are going to be out on the road with us, hopefully. So you get to meet them in person if you haven't already and talk shop. Hope everyone has a great day. Check back with us on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Catch you guys later.
Thank you.
All right.
Got it.
Have a good one, guys.